Oh, hi, everybody. Hey, we're here. This is Off the Page Games. I'm Jay, and we're here with Sen and Alara, who are the co-designers of Grendel. And we're just doing a Q&A, and this is a very informal and friendly kind of chat to kind of learn more about these two designers and as well as the game of Grendel. And so first off, let's do a small little introduction. Tell us who you are and maybe just give us the 2 minute history overview of how, your game design journey and really go start with Sen.
Okay, hey, my name is Sen-Foong. I'm a board game designer, writer, and RPG designer from London, Ontario, Canada. And I've been doing this for I don't know how long. How old is my oldest son? So 19 years now, I guess, was when Jay and I first started thinking about maybe we should do this game thing. And we did the game thing. And we first signed one of our games, Belfort, to Tasty Minstrel Games, now defunct, and the rest of it's kind of game design history, I guess. I got back into RPGs when John Gilmore asked me if I wanted to start writing for Kids on Bikes, and then since then I've been doing RPGs as well as board games ever since that, and so got lots of titles under my belt. And Grendel, being one of my favorite comics ever in the history of comics, is kind of like a dream come true. So that's me in a nutshell. What about you, Alara?
Yeah. Can we hear me okay? Sorry, we didn't do that. Great. Awesome. Yeah, I am Alara Cameron. I've been designing games since 2018. That's when Korra came out. First game was a co-design with Sen over there, The Legend of Korra. And since then, had about a game a year on average come out until now, 2025. Most of my work in games has been intellectual property based. So things like Korra, Batman. There was a Dragon Ball Super game in there at some point. More recently, Lupin, and this lovely game Grendel, which is our latest one. I'm super excited about it. This was an IP I came to the opposite way of Sen, which is to say I read the comics because of the game, and I got to say I'm really glad that I got to. It's certainly a really cool thing. Wild that it came out kind of around the time that I was born. I think it's an '80s comic, right?
Starting, yeah.
So yeah, no, really exciting project, really exciting graphic novel series, comic series.
All
I'm
right, so
happy to be here.
that's awesome. Sen, is this a question you can even answer? What do you prefer more, making board games or writing RPGs?
E. Don't ask me that on live stream. I'm kidding. You can ask me. I like both for different reasons. So I definitely have more creative leniency, and I get to like wildly create when I am doing RPGs. But there's definitely a part of my brain that likes the systematic, very structured, these rules are the rules and they have to be done this way part of board games that is not the same as the homebrew kind of not rules as written worlds of RPGs. So I like them both for different reasons. I spend probably about an equal amount of time on both sides of the table. So yeah, it's been a good transition to have both in my life again, because I gave up role playing games when I was in university with Jay because I was almost failing out of university, and so I gave up role playing games. I literally just told this story to another person on another podcast,
Hmm.
and I gave up games, and then eventually after I finished my first degree and figured out that I'm actually an okay student, we started playing those German games. Remember,
Oh
like
yeah,
1996, 97 around when we started playing like Usurpe and Catan and
Titan.
yeah, all these games that were well, Titan's American, but all these games that were imported and translated, and that I could deal with because I could put them away on the shelf and I never had to think about them again. Whereas RPGs kind of live in my head rent free. As soon as I get in there, it's like, oh, now what kind of character am I going to be, and what's his backstory, and
Hmm.
what's her backstory, and how did they get together? And yeah, it just becomes a whole thing where I write the whole story, and it takes a lot of my time and brain power, which I didn't have enough of to spread around when I was doing my undergrad and my grad school stuff. So
right.
Yeah, now that I'm able to spend time doing it, I love spending time doing it that way. So yeah, RPGs great.
That's
Games
great.
great.
I will shout out that this is a live thing, so anybody can type in some Qs. If you got Qs, we'll try to get you some A's. Alara, why is it that you think that you've been in the world of IP so much? Do you think there's a reason behind that?
I think it's just coincidence. I have a habit of being in the right place at the right time when an IP opportunity rolls up. Also, Sen taps me often to help with this or that other IP project when it rolls up his alleyway, and so it's just happened that way.
Well, a lot of
Um,
times, Alara, it's because you, like me, wear your heart on your sleeve about, who you are and what you like. And if I know somebody
right,
that I like and design well with like something, I'm gonna tap them to help me with
of course.
designing that game, or design that game instead of me if they're, love it even more than I do. I think there's something to be said about the 80s and maybe early 90s when all of us kind of were kids, that the IP games at the time, they stunk. Like, I mean, let's be blunt about it. They were bad. And I hope that Jay and you and I, all three of us who've worked in IP games a lot, have changed that for this next generation of fans who can say, I love this and I play the game seriously, not ironically.
Awesome. All right, so let's shift gears. So now we'll spend the rest of the time talking about why we're all here. Is talk about Grendel and figure out some behind the scenes stories, some history of how it came to be, and some of the decisions behind it. So earlier this week, on the weekend we learned from a Q&A with Matt Wagner about how the concept of of a Grendel game came to be, and that is Matt Wagner emailed us out of the blue saying, "Hey, can you make a game for me, please?" And it was like, what? Matt Wagner emails us out of the blue. It was great. It was so wonderful. And so I'll tell the start of the story, and then then bring Alara into it. How it transitioned from that. It started with Sen and I chatting about, well, what could a Grendel game be about? And we're kind of brainstorming a few things. And because of Grendel and his arch nemesis Argent, and then there's other people and stuff. I'm like, wouldn't it be neat if there was a one versus many game? That might be neat, instead of a one versus many, but like one versus many or something like that. And then Sen said, "Oh, I think I have a game like that already."
Yeah, and Alara and I have been designing games together for a long time now too, right? So I started designing games with Jay, and then Jay moved, which is actually kind of why we started designing games.
Actually,
Yeah, and then Alara and I met over like board games week,
BGG.
and
Yeah.
and I asked her the question like, "Oh, I see you're from Canada. Where are you?" And she's like, "Oh, I did my university at Waterloo, and I'm now at Western
It
for
was, yeah.
PhD." It
I'm
was your
moving to
PhD?
London in 2 weeks, I said.
Yeah, to start my PhD. And it's like, I'm already there. And so that's how we met each other, was through BGG, and then brought
that's
Alara on board
funny.
into the wonderful world of the now sort of kind of, I wouldn't say defunct, but definitely laying low, Game Artisans of Canada guild group that Jay and I were part of. And from there, we just started designing games. And we had really liked games like Root, and before that, the predecessor of that, which was Vast. And Alara bought Vast. I didn't buy Vast. Alara
Vast,
bought
I love
Vast.
Vast.
And she's like, "You got to play this game. It's so cool." And we played the game, and it was cool. And it's like, but I don't know how to, I don't know what you're doing. You don't know what I'm doing. And we said, yeah, it's a good game. It's got lots of potential. And we kind of put it away. And then a couple years later, they came up with a Root, and we're like, oh, that's kind of what we really wanted out of this asymmetrical sort of factional game. But there's at least some kind of tie that binds them all together in a much more cohesive way than Vast was. Vast was more like Vast had to walk so that Root could run, basically, right?
Cool.
And I'm friends with Patrick Leader, who is the publisher of Leader Games and both Vast and Root and other games. And so we're like, well, what if we made a game for Patrick? And I don't know how we came to Aliens versus Predators versus Marines.
Well, so because we did so much IP work together, sometimes when we were just looking to like work on a design, we'd grab an IP that was probably out of reach or whatever, but it was like, you know what, this is inspiration. And like, I think probably one of the Alien movies had just come out recently, and so we were like, you know what, we're gonna explore this asymmetric design idea we've got with the alien, predator, and some marines on a spaceship.
And the nice thing about that kind of, not dichotomy, I guess it was a trichotomy of the aliens versus the predator versus marine, is that there is usually only one alien, but there's many forms of the other, like the littler aliens that run around and do things, like the dogs and the face huggers and things like that. So you have like units of different variants and calibers, and then the
Right.
predator is a singular unit that hides and isn't necessarily visible, and the alien crawls around in the vents and the ducts, and then the marines are helpless and there's just
Food.
lots of them.
Fodder.
We called them food.
And exactly. So we used those as biomass, remember? They
Right.
created biomass by which the aliens would then transform the ship into a alien hybrid ship, like very H.R. Geiger, right? While Predator was trying to hunt trophies and get the heads of each of the different types of alien xenomorphs and
Wow.
obviously the weak
Yeah.
human marines.
So yeah, we've been sitting on that for a couple of years, and it kept running into Roblox as a design, you know, but it was our like little
Did it ever get
asymmetric
pitched?
baby.
Did it ever get pitched to
I mean, we showed it to Patrick
We
at
showed-
Gen Con one year. It was actually the year that Root launched. So he was like dead. He was like sitting in his booth on a lawn chair with like no boxes of Root because he had just sold like everything out. And he's like, I like it, guys, but I'm
Sorry.
and the other thing that you have to know about Patrick and Leader Games is that they have a whole team, an internal team of designers and developers. So they very rarely take anything external. He's a friend, so it's more like, let's show this to him and see what he thinks about this as a game, not necessarily that he's going to sign it.
Sure.
So did we pitch it? Nah, not really. Kind of really. I don't know. We were more waiting for like somebody to have that exact license and then say, "We got the game for you."
And then I came along.
This opportunity came along.
Yeah. And so then you actually pitched. I think it was at a convention, the Gathering, where you sat down and we played the game as it was at the time as an Alien vs Predator, and we had to figure out can we adapt this to a Grendel game?
Yeah.
What were your thoughts? Do you remember your thoughts on like, well, who's which faction, or how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, the original game had some decent hooks for getting that transformation started. At least insofar as both Predator and Marine were primarily single figure factions, so they felt like they might have a good basis for either Argent or Grendel. And the Marines, there was a lot of them, and you know, Grendel needs food just like the aliens do, someone to kill. So we figured, you know, this could be the mob. You know, we can have this like huge pile of guys running around, and then Grendel can kill them.
Yes, that was basically it. And we had the idea of the shades, like the whole idea of the Predator hanging around and hiding and things like that, is actually from a combination of Aliens versus Predator versus Marine and another IP game that we had actually been very close to making, which was for a video game, actually, where we had this idea of you never know quite exactly where this character is. And so he shows up the shades.
That's right. So I remember that back in the first many versions of the game, Grendel would have many Grendels on the board, and we called them shades. And the thematic tie-in to that was that, it's he's so fast that he's anywhere. He's here, he's there, and it worked for quite a while. And just to even give people more context, right from the get-go, from the Alien versus Predator versus Marine, and then transitioning into the Grendel game, it was very similar in its concept with regards to there was one faction was playing a dice game, one faction was playing a bag game, and I think at the time we had three, right? Because obviously
it was actually a push your luck card flipper a deck building game, and a hidden movement game.
Yeah, that was the original.
Oh,
Like,
I didn't see that one because I think
Yeah,
the one I saw was the
no,
dice.
you had to have seen that one because there was no
you
other
saw
one.
it.
I thought the very first game had a
The
dice.
dice came in right away because we needed to get to 4 factions, so that was the first one that we made.
Mhm.
And the hidden movement didn't survive because it was the weakest part of the original design, and so we set it aside. And
Because it was hiding in the ducts and the vents and whatnot, and that was
yeah,
didn't work.
and there was just like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a design egg that we never like cracked through. Is like
Yeah.
part of the original idea. You're right. Was like every what survived from the Aliens versus Predators design to the new Grendel design is mostly just the design theory, which was that we wanted every faction to, on your side of the screen, play your own game using your own game mechanics, right?
Right.
The original was deck building and card flipping and hidden movement. Now we've got dice rolling and assignment, bag building.
Yeah.
We still have a push your luck card flipping,
Mhm.
although that one was Jay's little idea. Experiment, and then we've got
Yeah,
the
for Argent.
Rondell thing with the police, and
Thanks
then
to Cat Dreyer suggested a rondell.
suggested a Rondell, and then Sen came up with the polyomino system for the police after a great deal
Press. For the press.
press. It's another P.
We refer, by the way, in our private forum, we refer to them as GAMP and the press.
Yeah.
All the factions have initials, and then there's the press.
Yeah.
So that like concept of on your side of the screen you play your
Right.
own board game, but then on the shared side, the board, the middle of the table, we all do the same thing, right? We've all got we've all got figures. Not everybody has grunts. Grendel doesn't, but everybody's got captains. Everybody has corruption tokens. Everybody puts aggression tokens in the towers, and the way they interact with each other is through the same icon system, right? We got punches, we've got degrades, and we've got movement, and those are consistent. So like part of what our hope was that by having the shared points of interaction, it would be easier for players to engage with each other at a strategic level, even if I don't really fully get what the heck is going on when you pull tokens out of your bag as Grendel. I do know that if I punch you 3 times, that is bad for you because your character is a captain and you punch captains 3 times to hurt them.
Let's talk about that for a bit. About you talked about Vast and Root, and those are wildly successful games. And I think the only knock you'd ever say about that game is that it's just a steep learning curve. It's a lot to get into. It's not a game you play once and put it away. It's a game that you want to play 3, 4, 5, 6 times to kind of understand how it all works. How did that kind of existence of that game and that kind of a steep learning curve affect your decisions in design of this game?
Well, I mean, Vast is kind of vast. Vast is very different actually than Root, and Root is more of the influence, I would say, than Vast is. Vast is sort of like the dream without the reality of, yeah, people have to actually learn it, right? So we weren't even aiming at Vast. We were aiming more at a Root level game that had something just a little different to it than Root does. Like, I love Root, by the way. I think Root's a wonderful game, and kudos to the designers and the developers and the artists and everybody who's doing stuff with Root.
Of course, yeah.
And I think Vast is a really cool concept. I don't love playing Vast because I'm the kind of person who needs to know what everybody's doing in order to plan my strategy. And so that's kind of where we were at. We were trying to make a game where I should know how to stop you, but if I don't, I still know what to do. Right? I know that I'm aiming for this type of thing.
Gotcha.
And my things should, by me doing what I should do, it should in some way reduce the chances that you're able to do what you need to do, even if I don't interact with you very specifically on that same vector, right? Each faction has vectors that they're gaining points on. And basically, it's just ways to score in different areas and zones. But my scoring and your scoring aren't directly oppositional, but are sometimes in conflict with each other, right? And that's why the mayhem rounds are so mayhemish, because you're jockeying for position inside of this one little area that we're scoring. So yeah, I'd say that vast is a aspirational goal, whereas root was more of like that's kind of what we're modeling this on or after, and not really all the way though. I think there's something
Yeah.
a little different between what we did. So Alara, like what do you think? How did we look at Vast and Root? Because I don't even think Root was that out at the time. It was like this was the first Gen Con it was sold when we talked to Patrick.
I mean,
So
for the original design, no. But by the time we were trying to transform it into Grendel, and then making Grendel, to be honest, because
Mhm.
like I said, the original design theory is what held over. But once we started grounding it in an actual, real intellectual property, as always happens, the system had to change because the IP is what needs to guide the design. And so a thing made for aliens is not actually a good fit for Grendel. And
No.
so it changed, right? But we kept some of those initial spiritual ideas. And I think the really, really big one was the thing I already kind of mentioned. I love Vast. And the reason I don't own it anymore is because I would have to teach 5 games to play a 5-player game. And so I have to pull this game out and I have to teach everybody how to play every faction, because you have to have a sense of what the cave is doing so that you can anticipate when the game is going to end. And you have to have a sense of what the goblins do.
Every player
Yeah.
has to know every
Yeah.
role.
You have to teach
Yeah.
everybody else's
Every role. You don't have to know the deep ins and outs of the roles, but you do need to know what they're capable of and how they're doing and what they're gonna do,
Mhm.
or what they might do. And Root is like, in my experience, 15% better. You don't quite need as much deep knowledge as of all of the other roles to play, but you do to play strategically well.
Yes.
One person at the table knows how the different factions actually function. You can more effectively undermine their progress, right?
And how does that compare or differ from Grendel?
So I think I'd like to think that Grendel is taking yet another step in the same direction that Root took from Vast, but from Root, where new players can sit down, and when I teach Grendel, I only really focus on teaching you how Grendel works and teaching you how the mob works. I don't worry about making sure that the whole table understands, so we're a little bit closer to, we're more like Root in that regard. But also, we've got these nice little player aids, thanks to Jay and Sebastian, who sort of figured out how to get all that information in a nice little card. But the things you really need to know about the other factions is you need to know how they score. And we've got that down to, one little sentence. Grendel scores by having fear in a space. You want to interrupt Grendel's scoring, destroy the fear. The mob needs to have 2 different pieces. You just need to make it so they don't have 2 different pieces in a space, right? So everybody's got a different asymmetric scoring condition, but they're simple enough that you can interrupt them without understanding how they come about. And likewise, the interaction, the way I interact with you is the same no matter what faction I am. If I want to get rid of Grendel's fear tokens, I degrade them. And that's the same icon, no matter whether I'm the mob or the police or the press or Argent. I might get that icon in a different way, but once I understand that degrading is how I get rid of tokens, and my goal is to get rid of your tokens, then I can march forward. So, the goal there is to get players on a strategic level much, much faster. I want your first game to be a game where you are fighting to win, not just learning to play.
Yes.
I like it. We have some questions, and I encourage anyone watching to ask some questions because this is live. And so we're going to throw up. First off, we have Joe, who's part of our team here Off the Page Games, but he doesn't know the answer to this. So he's asking, since this is the first Off the Page game, not designed by Jay, by me, can you talk about the collaboration between the designers and Off the Page Games, the publishing development feedback, and any other differences between Grendel and previous Off the Page games?
Well, I guess seeing as I've designed many of the other Off the Page games with Jay, I think I am eminently qualified to answer this question.
You have designed the same amount of Off the Page games as I have now.
I know, right? It's like we're the same person in different bodies. Jay is just a taller Sen. The I think it's relatively similar. So, and I mean, this is, a little bit of background information for everybody who's out there is if you were to really like hard code classify us, I am more of the thinker, Jay is more of the doer. That doesn't mean that Jay doesn't think that I don't do, but if somebody is going to say, get that to the table, it's Jay. If somebody's going to say, wait, we should think about that and do some mathematics, that's me. Right. And it's kind of the same relationship that I have with Alara. We pick who we co-design because they fill a gap in our skill set a lot of times, right? And it's not saying that either of us or any of us are particularly weak. It's just that we're really good at another thing, probably, and they cover those bases. And so Jay is really good, and since he's become a publisher, he's kind of has a little bit of a different insight and a different avenue of attack to things because there's money on the table, right? And it's his name, it's his brand. It's not my brand, it's his brand. And so he has some cares and concerns that I just don't until he makes it my care and concern, which is fine. So things like Jay is really interested about, you know, um, lots of exploration within the game system of the different mechanisms that could combine in different ways. And I'm not that person. I'm more of a person who wants one system that works really well all the time and is predictable. But in order to make a good product as well, we have to think about that. And Jay's thinking more from the product development side because he is literally publishing it, right? And it's his brand, his money that's supplying all of the stuff. And so when Jay says stuff like, I think we need another 3 cards, and we push back and say, well, I think we've kind of done all we can. He's like, well, because of this. And then we sort of get that now. We sort of are seeing things from a slightly different point of view, which is great because it does push us as designers to do things a little bit different, but while still justifying why things belong in a design as opposed to just making stuff because more stuff is better stuff in Kickstarter land. Because it's that's not actually true because you're only as good as the last game you make. And if you make a game where people say, and that was useless, and why do we have that? And that makes no sense, they're gonna think that about the next game. So Jay's request for things that as designers we might used to not have done as much of is informed by his role as a publisher. And I think he's doing a bang up job as a developer, you know, helping us to see where the holes in are the games, taking a lot of the games to testing. He is hired, I guess hired, I don't know if hired's the right word, an intern that is going over a lot of the solo game stuff that Alara's putting together, and working with Sebastian and Joe, who are direct hires for Jay, is it's just different. It's wonderful. And so yeah, I think in the cycle of publishing, developing, and design, which actually goes in the opposite order of that, design, develop, publish, that it's been different, but it's been good. And I think as we do more and more games together, all the way from mind management and then core discovery and now Grendel, the process, it hasn't got easier. It hasn't gone better. It's always been the same. It's kind of always been good, right? There's always been a good thing. And that's because we come from a place of communication first and foremost. Like, I don't know if you ever look at our private messages to each other. I think every second question that we ask is, can you explain that a little better to me? Because I don't quite understand what you're trying to say, right? Because we're good at articulating our ideas, but nobody's perfect. And so we're often asking each other, either I'm asking Alara, Alara's asking me, Jay's asking Alara, Jay's asking me, whatever it is, or we're asking Jay, can you clarify what you mean by that?
Mhm.
Because I'm not exactly sure. And that's what happens when we develop over, we're in 3 different cities now, right? We all used to live
Mhm.
in relative proximity to each other. Well, not really, because Laura wasn't even in the picture back when Jay lived with me. Jay and I actually used to live in the same house, all right? And then we used to live in the same city, and then Jay moved out west, and then Alara moved to London where I was, and we lived in the same city, so we could always get together and hash it out in real time, in real space. And so I think, if anything, Joe, that's really it's not the problem. It's a solution to distance, but it creates its own problems in communication, and that's really where I think the three of us have shined. I don't know what the past tense of that word is, over our careers, and it's why we choose to work together. It's because even when we don't understand each other, which happens, we are friends first. I think all of us, and we
Dang
communicate with each
tootin'.
other like that, right? So
Yeah.
I think that mutual respect. We all know we're all good designers. That's another thing,
Yep.
right? So we all have very much respect for each other's design decisions. We just need to figure out why. Why is that? Or tell me why, so I can be on the same train as you. And I think that's where we're at right now, is that constant communication, which is hard when we're all living different lives in different time zones. And some of us have really young kids now, and some of us have really old kids. But it's weird because my kids take up almost as much time as the little kids sometimes. So it's pretty funny, but yeah, that's the way it works so far, Joe.
Yep.
We're happy to have you as a part of it too, buddy. It's great.
So we got a bunch of new questions here. Brombe, I'm going to get yours in a bit because I want to talk about the press in just a bit. But Blackadder brings up about the Mayhem Tower design. So first off, before we get even to the Mayhem Towers, did the game always have two phases, or I don't think it did. Do you remember?
No, it didn't.
Not at all.
No, it did not.
That was me saying, I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was like, what if?
Yeah, we kept running into flow issues because everybody had these. We always had asymmetric scoring conditions, and that was something we were refusing to let go of. And it kept giving us trouble because everybody was scoring in different timing, right? One faction was scoring at the end of every turn and they could win at the end of their turn, whereas another faction
Oh my gosh,
could only score at the end of a round. And so we had all these different
you are so
timing.
right. It was
And so
chaos. It was
chaos.
Points. And it wasn't points.
And it wasn't points. No, yeah, it took us a long time to accept that maybe points can be a good thing.
And so that actually goes back to our original design intent, was to not have points, was to win by conditions that felt like
were thematic.
real and thematic.
Yeah,
and
Grendel needed like X, like 12 or whatever the number was, fear tokens in different spaces, and then he won immediately.
Yeah, he had to control the city, and
but we found that too swingy because he'd get a bunch out, and then people would destroy them all, and he'd go back.
Destroy them all.
And yeah, that's right.
So yeah, and Grendel could win instantly. As soon as he hit his number, he won. Whereas the mob had to like start their turn with a certain board condition, and so we'd been fighting and struggling to get this square to become a circle, and Sen, just as a band-aid solution, I think, was like, what if we just had
it was a joke.
It was a joke. I was at my wit's end, so I was like, let's do it. We'll do it. That's the only idea on the table right now.
So by having a Mayhem phase, that introduced points almost immediately, I think.
Yeah, and then we put all the scoring in the Mayhem phase so that we got rid of all of the different timing. It was like, nope, now everybody scores in the same timing window, and we're gonna for now, we're just gonna use points. Yeah. We'll come back to the dream. We didn't.
We never
it turned out the points were fun, and it was working.
It's hilarious because Eric Lang has this game design concept from Eric is like, hey, if you ever want to add complexity to your game, just add phases. Right? It's true, right? Because phasing adds complexity by nature of, you can do 2 points of damage in phase 1. A different card is do 2 points of damage in phase 2. A different card is do 2 points of damage in phase 3. Now you have this glut of cards.
We even had that, but we did get rid of that.
Yes, we did.
We had planning cards and Mayhem cards. We now just have Mayhem cards.
Yeah. So the interesting thing, though, is that in just basically herding cats, we were herding cats, and those cats were our ideas. And we said, let's make this phase do this phase does that, and we actually were able to actually cut down the number of distinct phases, really, to be honest, and then consolidate them to these 2 things, which helped us focus our ideas. Yeah. So that's how the phasing came. And the next question, I guess, leads to the triggers. Like, how did that get triggered?
I remember it was I remember one request. This is me being a developer publisher person.
This is you, yeah. This is you saying this.
It was me just saying the game is very flat. Like, it's just tokens on boards and very flat. Is there anything to get more verticality to it?
That was one question you had, but the other question you had that led to the actual tower design, not just the towers, but the functionality of the towers. Like, I wish I didn't know when this was going to happen. That's
Well,
what
that was step one. Was just we came up with towers. I think they were just piggy banks. They were just you would
Yeah.
put things in, and then kind of like El Grande, they would just you would reveal at a certain point, and then they gave. I think the first thing was they just gave you points. Like it was just another way to get points.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the first
they were
iteration was just another
influence
way to
points.
get points.
Yeah.
And then we were like, well, it wasn't super exciting. It was like it was okay, but it wasn't exciting. It was just another thing. So then I think we pushed it to what else can we do?
Action points. Yeah, and then we pushed it to actions. Like, oh well, maybe this is how you are limited in this scoring phase, right? You get the points that you get out of the tower.
And then did we have a track or something to after X number of tokens are put in here, then we resolve it.
Yeah.
And that's
it was still predictable. It was still linear.
And like nobody wanted to do the second last one, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
that
and then you had that whole gamey moment. Yeah.
And so we decided to say, what if we didn't know when it was going to trigger? And so a lot of my statements to Jay and Alara are like, okay, guys, this is a bad idea, but what if? And a lot of them actually come out to be like, oh, that's not a horrible idea. I don't like the way you implemented it, but the concept is good, right? Because I don't know, I made
what
something
it leads
up
to, yeah.
this. So what it led to was us talking to our friend David Killing, who is an industrial designer engineer. He used to make racing bikes. They're really cool racing bikes, Covello, like high performance, like Olympic level, Tour de France level bikes. And he and I do some game design together. I think he's designing a game with Jay, which is pretty cool. And maybe someday he'll design a game with Alara. But he is the guy that, if you see the tower in the new Pandemic Lord of the Rings version, he made that tower. He made the tower in Queen by Midnight, and he made the towers in the Luthier game, where it's a musical dice tower.
Wow.
And as you drop dice down, it plays like a tune. So he's really good with all this physicality and design.
Yeah,
He actually does not like designing games unless there's like some toyetic kind of
feel
to it.
And we didn't tell him, hey, make a seesaw tower. We just said, here's the challenge. We want uncertainty to when this will trigger. That's all we said. We didn't have any other guidelines. And
we put tokens in here, and we want it
to
use
explode at some point.
Yeah.
So if you're a designer out there, make friends with an industrial designer really fast, but not David, because he's our friend, and we need him for stuff. So because they will come up with solutions. Like literally, Jay and I asked him to design something. Like we said, hey, if you ever have time, think about this. And 24 hours later, he comes back with this cardboard computer that can calculate this thing that we wanted to do. We didn't use it because it was really expensive, but it's very cool. Yeah, he solved it, and that's the thing. He's a great problem solver.
And that first design he made was the one we used for the next year and a half through development because it was perfect. The seesaw tower. It was just exactly what we were looking for. It was amazing.
Yeah, and so the seesaw tower was a solve to the uncertainty, because if you could plan everything out to the millisecond, it's no fun. It's having that little bit of uncertainty that I'm going to F around and let's find out if that works. There's so much tension, and even just in our playthrough the other day, and you can watch that playthrough. I think where Jay and our playthrough is a little bit lower in views than Alara's playthrough with Jay, so I would like that to kind of get up there. So go watch my playthrough. You can also watch Alara's playthrough. But there's some times where like I put a big fat one token in there and expect it to go, and it doesn't go. And just like, yay, I get an extra turn, and I'm like, boo.
And meanwhile, in Jay and I's game, the tower, like one of the towers, just like drops.
Yeah,
we barely had any tokens in it. Neither of us were expecting it.
And that's the fun thing about it. There's some unexpected stuff because of gravity and physics and the physicality of it. And we're talking about obviously the computerized version on TTS, but the real version is even more visceral because it's like you see that tower drop.
It's amazing.
I did it.
So we got another question. It's also I still will get back to Brombe because I want to talk about the press. But before getting into the press, were there other discarded ideas for more factions? And maybe in talking about this, we can talk about other, because some of like the police used to be totally different, and like some of the factions we have played entirely different. Like police used to be an area enclosure game or something.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. There was Sen had an area enclosure version of police.
It was bad.
two discarded faction ideas, one of which I think might still have legs, and the other of which I don't know, but maybe we could figure out.
Don't say that. Don't tell Jay that. We're almost done this one.
I mean, the deck building. I think a deck building faction can absolutely work.
Argent has a bit of deck building, but it's super minor.
Argent has a bit of it, the spirit of it. But yeah, I think the issues we ran into with trying to make a deck building faction is we kept trying to make it too much. It needs to be like a super lightweight deck building game.
Yes, maybe not as light as Argent, but yes.
Yeah, but I think that one could still go. Especially now that we have things like press that are a little bit more complicated. So we've sort of raised the ceiling. So if there was ever a call for an expansion or something like that, gives us a little bit more design overhead.
Prime.
And the other one that I know we discarded, and I mentioned it earlier, was a hidden movement kind of thing, like a sort of like Mr. Jack Fury of Dracula style thing, where you've got one player, management, where you've got one player who's just playing with a whiteboard,
right?
And they've got pieces sitting in front of it, but they barely ever put them on the table.
And Argent was toying around with that for a while.
Yes,
both of those.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, these are both old Argent mechanics. Yeah, that we just set aside.
Well, we also didn't want to introduce like the whole dry erase board and all that stuff to this one.
It was really cumbersome.
Yeah.
And even police had like, it wasn't necessarily path building, but it was like tile placement and like getting.
So what police used to have, and I mean, this is sort of we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? So Eric and I think Kevin, was it Eric and Kevin had made a game a long time ago,
Arcane Academy,
that's the name. And it was like you powered up your spells that you were playing by creating like routes on a grid board.
I see.
With your tiles.
Yeah, and so you connect. It was like a tile laying game, but that was your action chain, and you would like.
So when you made a complete path, you followed the path, and those are the icons you generated. And so we did a similar thing for the police, but it was sort of slow. The other thing about police that we had originally was an area enclosure kind of mechanism, because police put barriers up.
Yeah,
and we wanted these barricades so badly. And they crossed the line. So barriers were interesting because they sat on the intersections of spaces, which was very different and very interesting. And it was just too slow. Like you couldn't do enough within the span of the game to really feel it compared to the other actions that people were taking. So that's the other thing that you have to do when you design asymmetrical games. Is you have to make sure that every faction feels like they're just doing enough. And the police just didn't feel like they were doing enough with that, and any more was too much. So there's all this conflicting granularity that you get with asymmetrical design that we just couldn't figure out for that particular mechanism. So we took it out, but
it came back. We really came back.
The informants.
The informants now sit on the border because we really like that idea of like a piece that straddles the edge, and which gave to everybody.
Yeah. And so we changed. Kat Dreyer, who is one of my co-hosts on Maple Syrup, she had play tested the game with us at Gathering when Stephen Alexander was playing as well. And she just wanted to do something different. And so she suggested the rondelle. And we're like, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds about right. Like police patrol around an area.
It was good.
And it ended up sticking and working. It took a lot of work to get that rondelle working. But the initial design call was frustration with the other method. Right? So it's not satisfying. It's frustrating. I don't understand it. Can we simplify this to something that's a little bit easier? The rondelle became that, right? And I like when you're talking to like Luke saying, "Oh, I love Arcade Academy. It's a fun little game." It is. That's a fun little game. But if that fun little game becomes part of a bigger game, is it too much? And I think that was the problem with a lot of those.
You weren't experiencing enough of it because the playing is only also just half of the game because we have the Mayhem. So and we don't experience it for half the game. So now it becomes even a smaller part of the game. So,
is the juice worth the squeeze? Is a lot of other design philosophy that the three of us use. It's like, am I teaching you this kind of mini game that you only play for half the game? but it's like really meaningful. It's like really important that you know the rules.
Yeah.
Well, then why am I teaching you it if you're only doing it for half the game and it's not that fun for the part that you're doing it in, right? It's fun in Arcade Academy because of what it does, but it wasn't as interesting here. So changing it to a more traditional kind of rondel
Although,
was a good idea in the end,
yeah.
right?
So before we talk about solo, because that's definitely something we want to talk about, is we're finally getting to Brombay's question he asked a while ago. Brombay asked, I haven't seen much about the press faction. How does that faction fit into Grendel thematically and mechanically? Do you see this system as one that could expand into other factions?
Oh, okay. So
let's talk about how it
thematically,
even came to be. And
one of our favorite things, all three of us, I think, love this about the Hunter Rose arc of Grendel, which is the first arc of the century spanning Grendel comic time stories, is that it's told from a lot of different perspectives, and we thought that was so cool. And the press is one of those perspectives because if you think about it, the whole Hunter Rose story is Grendel, Hunter Rose, narrating his tale to somebody, and that somebody is a member of the press, and I believe so, anyways. And there's a lot of stories where the press get involved, and the press are telling, trying to figure out who is Grendel, and they're trying to figure out, what's that thing lurking in the sewers, and so the press and the press take a very big role, even if they're never really named, in the narrative of Grendel at the time, because you have to understand, like Alara said, this was an 80s comic, right? Where the power of the press was a real thing. We feel it less and less these days because of the internets and whatnot. Although, if you want to watch a movie, go watch Civil War. Very interesting press related, journalism related story. And so um, I personally find like journalists are like heroes of mine. I think it's a heroic thing. I think it's a really powerful thing to spread the truth. So I actually talked to Chris Kirkman of Dice Hates Me, who is a journalism professor at North Carolina, and we talked for like an hour and a half about the press and the power of the press and what the press does and what they want to do and why they do what they do. And so that came out in the mechanisms of the press. I mean, I hope, in terms of how they fit in thematically to the world of Grendel, is shedding the light on the things that the public might find fearful, so they think it's maybe not as fearful, right? Shedding the light on organized crime, shedding the light on police corruption. That's the things the press should do in order to bring the truth, unbiased truth, to the public, so the public can make decisions.
so,
Right.
let's just jump to it. What mechanic are they playing as?
So they're using polyominoes.
Yay!
Yeah, because we like puzzles.
I love
Uh,
polyominoes. I think I really
and
pushed for that. As other ideas were
that
coming up,
was
I kept saying, "What about polyominoes?"
yeah.
yeah, and so Alara and I came up with this idea of printing pages, so that you fill up a page with polyominoes. While you're doing that, you're generating icons from the polyominoes themselves, and then when you print a page, you get upgrades, and based on how many polyominoes you could possibly fit on the page, right? So the more blank space there is, like space without polyominoes, when you print it, the fewer upgrades are. So you're incentivized to actually try to fill your page, which is like getting lots of stories, right?
Mhm.
And that mechanism may fluctuate a little bit. Jay and I are working on a little bit of development with that right now. And so that's kind of the idea. Like, if you've seen Fit to Print by Flat Out Games, it's not at all the same, but the concept of using like polyominoes to make stories is similar in that.
I like that. It's like it feels like you're making a newspaper page.
Yeah.
It feels like really thematic, and there's even like ad spots on the pages that you
Where you
can't
cannot cover.
That part's really cool. So I think right from the get go we wanted that as an expansion. We didn't want that as part of the core set, and it doesn't mean it goes up to 5 players. It's just a fifth faction that you could play in any 1, 2, 3, or 4 player game.
Yeah, and it's basically a little more thinky, which might slow some people down. Jay and I are working on trying to speed it up right now,
Yeah.
so that's kind of where we're at with that. In terms of the question, like, do we see the system as one that could expand to other factions? Like, I don't think so. Like, I think we're going to
That's
keep.
not
keep all the factions very independent mechanically. So if we do feature future factions in the future, which with Grendel Prime could be a future faction, because
Literally.
he's in the future,
Mm.
it wouldn't be similar. We did used to. Oh my gosh. We haven't talked about this yet. We used to have, and this is a holdover from Aliens versus Predators, because I love face huggers. We used to
Oh,
have interaction points between every faction and every other faction. So I will let Alara talk about that because
oh,
it became a big bugaboo for everybody.
oh! I mean, it was it's because it was the only cool. It was the sorry, not only cool. It was the coolest mechanic of the original design. But we did have to
What
let it
was it?
go for
What was it specifically? I'm
Face
forgetting.
huggers.
the face huggers. So we had the Marines were deck building, and so you were playing a deck building game, right? But like part of that design was like you need to have curses in your deck building game,
Right,
right? Like
traps and
cards
curses,
that suck.
Right.
And so we thought, well, what cards could suck for the Marines?
Face
I know, a face hugger. A face hugger
You really
sucks.
suck.
What does a face hugger do? It puts a baby alien in you that then explodes out of you later. And so the alien player could add face hugger cards to your deck. And then the way that mechanic worked is if the alien player spent an action, they could say to the Marine player, do you have a face hugger in your hand? Sort of like Go Fish. And if the Marine player had any face huggers in their hands, they got exploded
Yeah.
Awesome.
into new aliens.
But we
Um,
even tried that similar concept with people being able to curse or whatever we want to call it, trap Grendel, because Grendel had a bag. We thought for the longest time, wouldn't that be great to have crappy tokens in Grendel's bag
Yeah.
that other players could impact by dropping it in there? Felt like, theoretically, felt like that's
Player
something.
interaction.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
a good
yeah.
thing, right?
But
But no, bad player interaction, which is actually something we haven't actually talked a lot about in this, but I think is another really cool thing about what we've done with this design. Grendel is an incredibly aggressive, high player interaction game where most of the player interaction doesn't feel bad somehow. Like, I kind of expect you to destroy my stuff, and I'm going to destroy your stuff. But the players don't get to rip apart each other's engines. I can't make you less effective. I can just destroy your stuff. And that's pretty neat. And we did get there by going through a lot of things like this, the various versions of face huggers, which is players being able to give each other bad stuff and call it in different ways. And it turned out those things all just felt really bad in ways that didn't have payoffs that were worth it. So we've kind of got like a take that game without the that.
We did the take.
not a taking.
I'll take
Without
that.
the taking, it's just all that, you know?
Yeah.
There's also
And a
sometimes
bag of chips.
the take that if I added a trap to you, there's some games that I could add 4 traps and you never drew a trap and it felt like useless and pointless to even do.
Right. What did I even put that effort in
yeah.
for? Yeah.
That,
So, like,
that was the other thing. The
everything-
payoff was really low.
Yeah.
Or
And that's
swinging.
part of and that's part of where we have the consequences system came from, because we wanted to make sure that players had positive rewards for everything, for doing stuff, you know?
That's right.
Because it never feels good to spend your limited actions just to stop someone else from getting points. It doesn't help me, that just hurts you. So then we added the consequence system, which is there's a little chart on the different player boards that tells you when you destroy something, you get a bonus based on how difficult it was to destroy. And I mean, that's something Grendel always had. Grendel's whole thing was you destroy stuff and you get your fear tokens. And then we thought, well, like, that feels really good for Grendel. Why can't the mob have their own version of that?
Yeah. That's right.
And that's part of what like tied it all together. And that's part of also why it doesn't feel too bad when you destroy my stuff, because then you get something for it. And like, I'm like, well, you didn't just do it to spite me. You also did it to get that thing. And so it's like take that without that.
I think something that went hand in hand with that decision was I'm not exactly sure when it came in the development, but the idea that you cannot score in a space that has 3 or more factions. I think that's got helped with what you're saying, Alara, about it doesn't feel bad because I'm doing it because I'm not scoring. I have to get rid of this piece.
I gotta get rid of you.
And this one only costs 1 aggression. This costs 2 to get rid of this token, so I'm going to punch this grunt. I have to.
Yeah. Sorry.
So
Yeah. I don't know when that scoring rule came up.
It solves a lot of problems though, because we used to have issues about like
it was
turtling the mob based on, and the police based on how they scored we would find in playtest they would turtle and wait till the end of the mayhem and then spread out because that's how they scored. But now with this rule about the 3 or more factions don't score, you got to get in spaces earlier to kind of assert your presence before other people do.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to solo. I don't want to ignore solo. So, okay. Alara, this was yours from the start, and so take us through your because you've done other solo games too. So take us through your methodology and how you come up with a solo game, and what are your guidelines, and how do you know this is how you should this is what it should look like for Grendel.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of my general philosophy for solo designs, I'm a solo board gamer myself. I own Mage Knight. I bought it primarily as a solo game. My girlfriend now plays with me. That's lovely, but that's just a bonus. I didn't expect that to ever happen. And so I've done a lot of solo gaming. So I've got a couple of things that I look for in solo games. I want low upkeep. When I'm playing a solo game, I want to spend most of my playtime puzzling out my turns, not managing 6 different processes. So low upkeep, as low as possible. I want it to feel like I'm playing the game. And that's on my turn when I, the player, am making my choices. But I don't need the solo player to operate like a pretend human. And this is one of the ways that I approach the design. I kind of make my my solo modes, in order to keep them low upkeep, I make them kind of dumb but overpowered.
You don't make them dumb. They just are. They just
are.
Play smart, right? Yeah, because they
don't play smart. Because I don't want to have a lot of upkeep, so they don't have. They have a little bit of logic to them, but they don't pay attention to all the different possible variables, and instead they compensate for that by doing a little more. By being a little bit more overwhelming. But all of that is within the constraint of if I was to hide the solo player behind a black, if I was to sort of Turing test it. It should still feel like you're playing against a person, insofar as you're thinking a little bit about what that player might do, and you're interacting with them in a way that's similar to how you interact with a human player. Might not be trying to outthink them, but I'm still thinking about them, and I'm still playing Grendel at the end of the day. So that's my solo design.
And that's one thing I liked about what you made sure was that each faction that plays currently against the mob, they're playing their game. I'm still playing a chit pull game. I'm still playing a rondel.
When you're playing solo, whatever faction you choose, you're playing it exactly the same way that you would play if you were playing multiplayer. It's actually a great way to practice the different factions and get more comfortable with their ins and outs.
And the automaton is still playing their game. It's not some made up new thing.
Yeah. No, and that wasn't something I had to do in the design, but I thought it would be a really fun thing to do. And as a designer, I like fun challenges. So when I sat down to do the solo mode for Grendel, I sort of committed myself to using. It was going to be a 2-player setup, and the opponent, the automata, was going to use a similar core system as what that faction does. So the mob automata rolls dice. Well, it rolls 1 dice, but it uses dice rolling to decide what it's going to do.
Because on the back of the player board, we have a whole new solo thing for the mob.
That's right. And then we've got the Grendel one up on the stretch goals now, and the Grendel one pulls chits from a bag and assigns them to rows, and just like Grendel, those rows chain actions. So Grendel's core mechanic is that you put a chit on the shock fork row and you get to do the action underneath it and every action to the left. So you're building these big action chains. The automata for Grendel does the same thing. It starts doing single actions, then it's doing a double and then a triple. And when it fills its row, throws its tokens in the bag and gets an upgrade token, right? Just like a Grendel player does.
Yeah. It's great. And there's only one new component we had to add for this to all work.
A deck of cards.
Yeah, deck of
Also,
cards.
deck of cards.
Yeah, the automata needed to decide where to act. And that's also where the little bit of intelligence comes from. So on the automata's turn, it's gonna do three actions, one action in each zone of the board that hasn't triggered a mayhem. And it's got a little deck of cards for each zone, one card for every space. So when it's acting in Queens, it flips the top card of the Queens deck. That's the space it's going to do its thing in. It uses its action system to pick an action, and then you do those things.
Mm-hmm.
Where it gets a little bit smarter is those decks are loaded. So whenever it runs out of cards in a deck, it reloads that deck. But first, you're going to scan the board, and any space in that zone where it's currently meeting its scoring condition.
Right.
So again, this is tying back to the regular game. For the mob, that's if it has two different pieces and there is less than 3 different factions in that space.
Right.
If it's Grendel, if it's got a fear token and there's less than 3 different factions in that space, that card goes in the discard pile.
Right.
So the automata does not act again in spaces it's already winning.
Yeah, it's great. And what I really like, we ended up having to come up with a couple of new icons because of how, having played the mob more than Grendel currently in the solo mode, I just like how it even though it's dumb, it has a bit of intelligence, and it's not and there's no decision from the player. It's like some of the spaces are place. It's an icon that says place a unique piece in the space or the card you just drew. So I drew space 11. I look at 11, already has, and it's got an order: grunt, token, captain. Oh, it already has a grunt. It doesn't have a token, so put a token because it needs 2 unique pieces to score. So it's it makes that it makes the moves that the automata play feel a bit smarter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's curated, right? The hands are curated that way.
I don't know if we have. Well, will we have a solo mode against each of the 5 factions? I'm just going to leave that out there for you to answer.
I'm going to leave that for Alara.
Alara
left.
She's like, forget it. I'm out of here. I'm not signing up for that.
I don't know if that was on purpose or if it just happened, but that's hilarious.
So we have the Grendel one announced. We're working on the Argent because that has and it seems like it's going to be okay. We're brainstorming solutions for the police and the press because they don't have the same kind of randomizers of drawing from a bag or rolling a dice or drawing a card from a deck. But we have some ideas because we still want to have a rondel for the police. And we have some ideas. So maybe I don't want to promise it because I don't want to delay the game for 3 months to come up with it. But maybe we're hoping to.
Yeah, it'd be something that we'd like to do. If we can't, then I mean, if people like the game enough, we can always make expansions. We can always do something in the future. But that's future talk, right? That's difficult to.
And Bombay also asked if it would be possible to support all 5 factions in the game as a 5-player game, or is it something that doesn't work with player count? So I'll say that on one hand, it'll be a longer game because it's a 30-minute per player kind of game. So now we're talking a longer game, and there is one couple considerations is that it would potentially need to come with a heavier counterweight. Because every player count has a different counterweight because you need to allow more time to get more tokens in there. So if you use the 4-player counterweight in a 5-player game, people might not get enough opportunity or time to get tokens in before it drops. And so that might feel frustrating. And then also the current towers are only a certain size and it might actually get stuffed. Like you might literally physically be sticking out and you push it and it'll push the towers. So it might not. So that's why we didn't ever promise a 5-player game. We might be able to try it, but it might not be as good of experience.
Yeah, there are real limitations physically and size wise. Like the other thing is if 5 factions are fighting on even the 4-player. Well, so the 4-player board has more spaces, but that means the spaces are smaller, which means that there's not enough room for all the freaking tokens.
Yeah. It also gets busy. Yeah.
So it's going to get real busy real fast if you try it. I mean, I would love it. And maybe we make a giant Grendel map at some point. I don't know.
Did Alara leave us again, or did you just change it?
No, Alara dropped the game.
I wanted to ask her live and get her a recording on the solo modes.
Maybe she knew, and that's why she left you.
She left again. I think that's it, though. I think we were at an hour. I mean, we could sit here and talk for another hour if we wanted to.
Yeah.
But this
Oh
is
no, Alara's coming back. Hold on.
always come back here.
Luke, the
Kinda weird.
counterweights are made from cardboard, the cardstock.
Yeah. Yep. That's pretty straightforward. So that there's we have some ideas. Alara. So there was a question jumped out at just the right amount, right perfect time. Was is there going to be a solo mode against each of the 5 factions, Alara?
I'm trying.
She's doing her best.
Yeah, I mean, so we've got the Argent solo mode is moving into testing. So we have a design for it. It works in theory. We just gotta grind it out and make sure that, you know, we can make it balanced and fun. We have I have some notes for press solo mode. So like in theory, that one could move to the same stage as Argent. Hopefully this week. Police continues to be a bit of a bugbear. I really want to get it to work, though. We've got some ideas. It may require a little bit more proceduralism than the other factions, and the reason for that, to be like fully transparent on the design, is all of the other factions have something that's random. Mob has die. Grendel's got tokens from the bag. The press. Yeah, the Argent has a deck of cards. Yeah. The press has the newspaper cards with the.
They even have what's on the back of them. Backs of the newspapers, right?
The backs of the newspapers, though, can act as a piece randomizer. The police, which is one of the things that makes the game really cool from a like multiplayer standpoint, but is a challenge from designing the solo. The police don't have a random element. The police do what the police do, which is great if you've got a friend or a player in your game group who's like, I don't like dice or chance, and you'd be like, great, play the police.
Yeah.
Right. You just get to do your thing. You know, fate is not going to spoil your plans.
The only random thing they get is which cards they get, and that might lead us down a path of exploring some element of how we can control the base.
So that's why I said they might have an extra procedural step, and it's going to be a question of whether or not that is that feels good to actually play. But I'm trying real hard. I got 2 out of 5 are looking solid. 1 out of 5 is in a good place. 1 out of 5 I've got some good ideas, and then 1 I'm trying.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, police procedural is a thing, so I would be okay with that. So we could just put little numbers on the bottom of all the police cards if we want a randomizer.
Well, no, that's what I'm. Yeah, I mean, that is kind of what I'm using right now. Is the police action cards. You don't use them in solo. The cost, though, they all cost 1 or 2, and so you flip one of those, and that's how many spaces you move the car. And the problem is it's an extra deck you're flipping from. The other thing I'm considering doing is squeezing a little number on the bottom of all of the solo location cards. So the previously drawn you draw the location card, and it tells you how many spaces to move that car.
Right.
That's interesting too.
It would be a number on those cards that no other faction cares about.
Yeah,
that's fine.
But it could work, and then it's not an extra card draw.
That's probably better.
And it's no new components, no extra.
Because then you could have every zone could have 1 3 in it, for example, to really surprise. You know, like whoa.
Yeah.
Did you see Alara's eyes light up? 3s? Whoa. What is that?
3s.
That's wacky talk.
Well, this was awesome. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time. Thanks everyone for joining us and listening and asking questions. This will be up on YouTube for everyone else to watch, and we'll see you back on the Kickstarter page. Any last closing comments?
Joe is saying that the cars have a 1 and 2 in them.
They do, yeah. The cars do, yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, they do, Joe. That solves the second problem I've been having. Thank you.
See what happens when you look at stuff closely with like the graphic design in place. I mean, obviously, thanks to Sebastian, thanks to Joe, who have been wonderful throughout this campaign and to help us make all the prototypes and whatnot. So it's been great. Sorry, everybody, that we can't do the let's play. This is just a more difficult game to do that with than Core Discovery or Mind Management was. So
the day by day kind of updating the graphic. It was too complicated, like too many things that the Grendel player has to choose. So it was like it wasn't really working. It was a good idea, but
we'll use it again, or we'll figure something out to do with you guys. Maybe not during the campaign, but even afterwards. That are like just fun little problems. Like we do it all the time. So
yeah,
cool,
awesome. Alara, any last closing comments?
Thank you all so much for supporting the game. I cannot wait to hear what y'all think of it. I think it's just the coolest little thing that we've made. From the asymmetry right up to those wacky towers.
Wacky towers.
Wacky towers.
Thanks, everybody. That's
Sounds
awesome.
like a game that we should make.
Thank you,
Wacky
Sen.
towers. All right, everybody. We'll see you later. Thank you.
Bye.